Good afternoon. Oh, it worked. Great. I got your attention. Welcome. I'm Jane Dutton, and I'm one of the faculty members who's part of the Center for Positive Organizations, and we are really glad to have you here. This is part 3 in a series that we've been focusing on positive organizations and positive relationships, and it's my complete pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker. However, before we do that, I want to make sure to once more thanks the Joneses who are up here in the front who always financially support Positively. We would never be able to do this without you, so your continued support means a ton. And Janelle Fry, who's up here, Janelle, who is the organizer, always does a wonderful job for us, and for the whole center, all of our events. And I also want to just remind you that our last PosLinks session in this series is in December 16th, with our own Wayne Baker, who's on the faculty here in the business school and also in sociology, and he's going to be talking about the dynamics of generosity. But let me introduce Dottie. Dottie Deremo is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Hospice of Michigan, called the Harvard of Hospice. Hospice of Michigan is the largest statewide nonprofit end-of-life care provider in the nation, serving more than 1,300 patients. And
1,500.
Pardon?
1,500.
1,500, okay, it's updated. And their loved ones daily across 56 counties, is that right?
Correct.
56 counties in Michigan. She's also the founder and president and chief executive officer of Hospice of Michigan's innovative, wholly owned national subsidiary Advanced Illness Management Company, At Home Support, which is improving quality for patients with serious illness and their stressed caregivers pre-hospice, while saving 30% net total health care costs. Prior to working for Hospice of Michigan, Ms. Deremo was Vice President of Patient Care Services and the Chief Nursing Officer at the Henry Ford Health System. She's held several executive positions at the Detroit Medical Center and has been an assistant professor both at Michigan State University and Wayne State during her 44-year healthcare career. She's recognized nationally and internationally for her expertise on end-of-life matters, and she's also an invited speaker at conferences worldwide, author of numerous articles, and a contributing author to several healthcare books. She's been devoted to improving the health of the community through creative healthcare delivery models. I also learned some additional fun facts about Dottie that are not part of her official bio. First, she was the first nurse practitioner to open a practice in the state of Michigan. I think that's pretty amazing. Yeah. She loves horses.
I do.
And she lived in France as a young adult. She's a Francophile. That means she loves all things French.
That's true.
I don't know if you speak French, too? But today she's going to talk to us about leadership from within. So please join me in welcoming Dottie.
Good morning. I think it's still morning. Can you all hear me in the back? Yeah, I'm your lunch entree. I know you've got pizza in front of you, and I'm blessed that you're eating during the presentation instead of being the speaker after lunch, which is like the kiss of death. If you're trying to figure out how old I am, since I've been in healthcare for 44 years, I started when I was 3. But my oldest son is 47, so I'm not sure how all that worked out. I'd like to spend some time on positive leadership and positive relationships. And I'm going to create a frame, and then I'm going to give you an overview. And at the end is the Q&A and participation. Did you hear the word participation? That means y'all got to ask me stuff. And we've got to have some conversation back and forth. So, there you go. Okay, they changed it on me. All right. Let's start with the overview. Well, let me go back. I'm going to talk about some leadership myth busters. We all have these fantasies about what leaders are and are not, and I'm going to tell you the unvarnished truth. And then I'm going to work on some very specific lessons that I've learned over these 44 years, how leadership actually doesn't start out there, it starts inside. And I'm going to give you some very practical lessons that I've learned over the years, the CEO's secret sauce, and then we're going to open it up for some discussion. All right. Here you go. Whoops. Let me go here.
This man right here is my great-grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family.
Herding cats. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy.
Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, well, that's another thing altogether.
Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here, and if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know.
You see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do.
I wouldn't do nothing else.
It ain't an easy job, but when you bring a herd into town and you ain't lost a one of them, ain't a feeling like it in the world.
That's what a leader is, right there. Because if you think an organization is full of everyone that goes like this, in essence, every organization is full of hundreds of cats. Individual, they have their own mind, and leading is more than saying you do this and you do that. So let's start with the first myth buster. The higher up you go, the more control you have. Right? Whoops, I've got it. There we go. Not. And let me tell you about just our statewide organization. I have 600 employees. We're as far north as Rogers City. You know, that's close to the bridge. There ain't nothing in Rogers City, except there's not even a stoplight. There's not even a stop sign. It's a very small place. But I can tell you that if I give an edict that every office across the state will have their thermostat dialed to 72 degrees in the office because that's the optimum temperature for productivity. And I walk into the office in Rogers City, is the thermostat dialed to 72 degrees? Absolutely. Because when I was in Alpena, she's on her way to Rogers City. ETA is, get that darn thermostat set to 72 degrees. Is it at 72 degrees any other time? Maybe, maybe not. Because the folks in the Rogers City office make a decision, this heater overheats. If we have it at 72 degrees, it's going to be 80 degrees. So we're going to turn it off most of the time and then turn it to 68 when we're really feeling cold. And I could go to every office around the state and the same thing would happen. Because individuals have brains and they will make decisions. The higher up you go, the less control you actually have. If you're at the point of service delivering a product, you have a lot more control. But as you go up higher and higher levels, you have less control because everything you have to do is through others. Everything you have to do is through others. My calendar, yes, I have some control over my calendar, but so does everybody else. Business leaders, potential partners, donors, direct reports, you name it, they have control over my calendar. What I have learned is the higher up I've gone as a leader, the less control I have, except for one person. Who would that be? Me. Me. So, have you heard of the sled dog team theory of leadership? All right. Anybody watch Alaska, The Last Frontier, or Yukon Men, and they're doing this sled dog thing? Yeah. I'm with you, buddy. It's good. You should watch the Yukon Men. And if you watch a sled dog team running, what you will see is that every dog has the exact same view of the hindquarters of the dog in front of them. So even when you're the CEO, you have the same view as everybody behind you, except for the chairman of the board. They're the lead dog. Learning that hubris, as soon as you think you are in control as the CEO of an organization, that's your first step on the banana peel. It's important for the CEO to realize they're a lackey of the board, a lackey of the product and service that you're delivering. Your responsibility is to work just like everyone else, and you are not the top dog. It is the customer, it is the board, for a nonprofit, it's the community. They are the top dog, and you are an instrument. You're a lackey. Leaders are omnipotent. Where do we get that from? Anybody got a guess? When you're 2. Now, I have a 3-year-old, Tessa. She is learning that her parents are omnipotent. She wants to test that. But when you're 2 or 3, you learn that your parents are bigger than life. And you invest in them, all-knowing, all-seeing, all-believing. And that carries on to your teachers. When you're in kindergarten and grade school, etc. So subliminally, we have been built in with this idea of leaders know everything. How many of you have worked in the real world? Have any of you ever said, they, meaning leadership, they should have known, they did this, they did, anybody willing to put your hand up about the they? Okay. That they, it's we and they, comes from we expect leaders not to make mistakes, not to know everything, to be perfect, to be all-knowing, to be all-seeing, and to be able to anticipate everything in advance. And that's just not realistic. And we hold that as we become leaders, we put that on ourselves as well. So with those myths, how do you lead? What can you do? And where do you start? I first start with self-management, because in essence, that's the first person you have control over. You can't control them. You can control yourself. And Mahatma Gandhi, who is one of my heroes, said, you must become the change you want to seek in the world. You. So if you want more peace, you have to become more peaceful. If you want outcomes, you have to produce outcomes yourself. How are you behaving, talking? What are you doing? And is it congruent with what you're expecting out there? Now, I've practiced yoga for many years, and I have a combination of East and West philosophy. And this is from the Tao. There are some lessons that I think that have been very helpful to me. The first is of the four agreements of the Taoist philosophy. And Tao is a Chinese philosopher. It is a system in China that actually started thousands of years before any of the other traditional religions: Hindu, Buddhism, Muslim, Christian, Judaism. And there are some fundamental truths here. The first agreement: be impeccable with your word. And that is like gold, because in today's society, cheating is considered not so bad. Cheating to get ahead is okay. The problem with cheating is that it comes back to bite you. If you want a short career, you can cheat. If you want a longer career, at the end of the day, much of what happens is related on trust and integrity. And so being impeccable with your word by speaking, saying only what you mean, avoiding using yourself and your words in negativity of gossip about yourself or others. And you use your words, what you have control over, in the power of truth and love. Now, the ultimate cheater, anybody heard of Bernie Madoff? He was very successful, right? Well, it depends. If you were looking at Bernie Madoff 10 years ago, everybody would have said, wow, what a guy. Isn't he cool? What do people say about Bernie Madoff today? The problem with cheating and of not speaking and acting with integrity is not only that it comes back to bite you, it's an erosion of your own personhood. And over time, those erosions add up, and you become someone that you're not proud of. And that is more painful and also impacts your ability to be successful going forward. Agreement number 2, don't take anything personally. Is anybody wired to take things personally besides me? I was 6'8" when I started out, just so that you know. And if you looked at how I'm tested to take 99% of everything personally. If I did that as the CEO, I'd have a BYOW party. Do you know what that is? Bring your own weapon. I would do myself in. Because when you take things personally, and it's easy, we experience what happens to us as personal. But in the words of the Tao, nothing others do is because of you. That's a very freeing concept. That their drama is their drama, not your drama. You can choose to have it be your drama, but it is their drama. And so their behavior is, if you can create that separation and that boundary and realize that's their behavior and that it only has a reflection on you as you choose to allow it to have a reflection on you. So when you're immune, not when I say immune, doesn't mean that you don't listen and take that information in, but you need to make cognitive decisions about whether what is being said about you is true or not within yourself. And when you can be immune to some of that, then you won't be a victim of needless suffering. And a lot of what I see for young leaders is they're taking something so personally, and the conflict that they're having between a colleague and themselves is a conflict around style and preferences, but both sides are taking it personally. Agreement 3, Don't make assumptions. That's a hard one. Do you all know what assume means? Making out of you and me. ASS, out of you and me. That's what assume is based on. Don't assume that where someone is coming from is where they're coming from. Ask questions. Clarify. Find the courage to say, I'm interested in why you responded that way. Communicate with others as clearly as you can and avoid misunderstanding, sadness, and drama. This is one agreement that really can make a difference. And do your best. That's going to change from time to time. Sometimes you don't feel well. Sometimes you haven't had enough sleep. Sometimes there are challenges in your personal life, in your family life, in your work life. But if you do your best, that's all you can do. If you do your best, you won't feel guilty. So now to lessons of self-management, number 3. Happiness is when you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. How many of us say what folks want to hear and then feel inside your gut like, ugh, I really wasn't true about that? Or you think one thing and you act a different way because that's what you think. But harmony, and the reason I talk about this issue of harmony and balance, it makes a difference as to how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. Have you been around someone that seems to be kind of together and put together? And don't you feel more comfortable than someone who seems to have a lot of personal, internal conflict? Lessons on self-management 4. You are your instrument. So the higher up you go, the less control you have except over yourself. Once I accepted that within myself, I began to realize that I was my instrument. I had to play the music, and I had to do it through myself. First of all is creating balance. And these are lessons that you don't learn in MBA school. These are the hand-to-hand combat lessons that help you have long-term sustainability in leadership. Your mind will not work unless you create a balance in your spiritual life, your home life, and your work life. It's like a 3-legged stool. And if you do not focus on all 3 legs, the stool is tippy. You have to respect your body. That means eating. Pizza's great, I got to tell you. Pizza's outstanding for your body. Actually, if you can focus on what's better for your body, unfortunately, carbs, a lot of wheat is not, and sugar, all the things that we're all addicted to in this society are really not the best for one's body. And learning what works for you and your body chemistry and trying to stay away from those things that will actually not help your body function will give you tremendous energy. Exercise, one of the best stress relievers that you can have. We are wired as hunters and gatherers. At the base brain, we have a fight or flight response that is hardwired into how we act. So if I'm a hunter and I see a bear, I'm either going to hit it over the head or run like heck. That's an appropriate response. But when I'm a CEO and I have a conflict conflicting situation right in front of me. It's like seeing a bear. My body responds, your body responds like you've seen a bear. Now, if I hit that person over the head or run out of the room, those are inappropriate responses, right? So in modern day society, our bodies are still wired like that basic brain, that hunter and gatherer. It's even called the reptilian brain of the fight or flight. It's not appropriate in modern day society, but all those corticosteroids, all those stress hormones build up in the body. And whether you look at them or not, they are in your body, creating a toxic soup. And the best way to discharge that toxic soup, there are two. One is exercise. Large muscle exercise actually helps to discharge and to neutralize those chemicals. The second is called a relaxation response. That's meditation, breathing, and I'll share with you some breathing exercises that you can use that will actually slow your body down, slow your heart rate, improve blood flow to your brain so that you're able to make better decisions in a conflict situation and not be storing all of those hormones. This is an important one. I call it going to the dark side. And this, anybody ever had conflict with somebody else? I can see a couple of people that have never had conflict with anybody, and that's I'm going to need to talk to you and have some therapy with you afterwards. When we become wise enough to realize that our perception is our perception, what we bring in is a part of the picture. And there's a whole other dark side of the picture that we don't even see. That is a powerful thing to recognize, is that your perception is still limited to the entire picture. There's the old metaphor of, I think it's 8 or 9 blind men that are trying to describe an elephant. Have you heard about that one? Where blind monks, one monk is at the trunk at the front and says, the elephant is like a snake. And another one is at the leg and says, the elephant is like a big tree trunk. And another monk is at the ears. No, it's like a great big leaf. And someone is at the hindquarters and has the little skinny tail and says the elephant is like a twig. Who's wrong? They're all right. But they all have a piece of the picture from their vantage point. And how that can help you as a leader, if you look at the research, 20% of the message that you as the CEO, at every level in the organization, 20% of the message that is being communicated downward and upward is distorted. So every level in the organization, if you're the CEO, the information you are receiving, you need to realize, is probably about 5 to 10% of what the full picture is. And the frontline deliverer of service or product is getting your message about 5%. And by the time you are sick of your message, to the point that you just want to go to the porcelain goddess and heave up your pizza, is just about the time that every level in the organization is beginning to get the message. One of the ways I've dealt with that in our organization is, since we have employees that are scattered all over the state, we have a once-a-month call called Phone Home with Dottie. The entire organization, from aides to vice presidents, can call in. I talk about what's going on at Hospice of Michigan, what's going on at the state, what's going on nationally, some key events, make some announcements, and then I open it up for question and answer. And nothing is off base as long as the questions are appropriate and professional. When we first started doing this, I had Oprah Winfrey, Ruby Red, Ferris Bueller. People were not comfortable and trusting enough to give their own names. So they used other names, proxy names, because they thought somehow, leadership knows everything and is going to get me. Over the years now, folks give their name, where their team is, where they're located, and what their question is. The other thing about this, as the CEO, is many times CEOs see themselves at 50,000 feet, which is true. You have to have a broader view of strategy, and I'm going to talk about some CEO secret sauce at the very end of the presentation. The issue is, if you're the CEO, you're also responsible for the point of delivery, for where the product and the customer come together. And if you do not understand that in a very tangible way, you cannot make quality decisions at 50,000 feet. The Japanese in the Kaizen model call that go see. If there's an issue, go see. You don't want to micromanage, you don't want to tell people how to do it, but you do need to have a tangible understanding. And my techniques is I take a diagonal slice through the entire organization. I have an executive team meeting once a week that's in the standard time. We're all over the state, sometimes all over the country, but there's a standing meeting that we have on Tuesdays. That's one way I get information. But I also interact with the directors. Not all the time, but I go to every team at least once a year throughout the entire state. I take the director and the managers out for dinner. Folks, over a meal can be much more relaxed. You learn more. And then I have a meeting with the staff. And then I go on a visit. If I go with an aide, I actually help them bathe patients. It's the most honorable work that one can do. There's magic in being able to gently touch someone. It's an honor for me to go and to witness the work. But what I also witness is whether the systems and the structures that we've supposedly put in place are actually working. Let me give you a specific example. I went on a visit way up north with a nurse, and she needed to go into a home, and she had a dumpster. I thought we had just-in-time inventory. Well, we have just-in-time inventory, but what our staff have is they had these totes that you could buy in Walmart or Target, a big tote, with tons of supplies, because you didn't want to get into a home and not have what you needed. I watched this poor nurse spend 5 minutes dumpster diving for a catheter because it was all in there. And I asked her, because it was huge and it was heavy, how do you have this in all the time? And she said, well, no, on the weekend I need to go grocery shopping and I can't have this in my trunk. I said, well, it's pretty heavy. She said, yeah, I have to get my husband to lift it out so that I have trunk space over the weekend. Not everybody has a husband or a significant other or somebody that's beefy enough to pull that out. I asked the question. I thought we had just-in-time inventory, and I heard we had totes. My mind was that there were little sections where each of these supplies could be, that they would be stacked. No, that's not how it was. Because folks had gone on the cheap, because the totes would only cost $5. It was a short-term, cheap investment, saving money, cost savings, but on the other end, a very expensive registered nurse that we pay lots of money for has wasted time and effort and inefficiency. Unless I went to the dark side, I never would have known. I would have assumed that we had a tote system with just-in-time inventory that was efficient and effective, and we didn't. No one else saw it. But when you go to the front line and you take the customer experience in mind as you are the voice of the customer, not only the patient, but that front deliverer of service, unless you understand that, you cannot be an effective leader. Because in essence, as a CEO, you're overhead. You're overhead. You're not the reason for being for the organization. You're overhead. Now we're going to so that's some self-management things. Now I want to shift the frame a little bit, and I want to look at what it's like to lead others and some lessons on leading others. My dad, smart man, I was crying once when I was about 12 because all the other girls had chests that looked like Colorado, and my chest looked like Iowa. And I was sure I was never going to look like Colorado, and no boy was ever going to like me. And I was crying, and my dad kind of hugged me, and he said, "Honey, remember when we went to the aquarium the other day?" I said, "Yeah." And what did you see? I said, "Well, there are all kinds of beautiful fish." He said, "That's right. There are all kinds of beautiful fish. If there was only one fish and all of the same kind in the aquarium, it would be pretty boring, wouldn't it? We're lucky that there are so many fish. And you are your own unique person. And you will come to Colorado at your own time and your own space." We are all wired differently. Part of that view of the dark side for others is to understand that everyone is a separate fish in that aquarium. Everyone is wired differently. Some of us are introverts. Some of us are extroverts. Guess what I am? Blatant extrovert, I know. Some of us are process. Some of us are big picture. Some of us like lots of detail. Some of us don't want anything to do with detail. Everyone's style is different, and everyone is wired differently. And the way to get an organization to move forward like those cats is to acknowledge that everyone in your organization is wired differently. And use that. Get that to become a symphony. If you think about all the different instruments in a symphony, they are all created differently, but when they work together, they have beautiful music. Don't try to change people to be what you want them to be. They are wired as they're wired. Do you try to make your toaster function like your iron? You go, absolutely not. But why do we try to make other people be who they are not and to not be wired? When there is conflict, and there is always conflict, when there is conflict, one of the ways you can self-manage, but what you can teach in leading others, is what I've talked to you about, the dark side, that there's more than one side of the picture. and to move from being defensive to being curious. The most recent brain research shows that if you want to move your arm, your brain tells your arm to move. We all know that. That's a no-duh. What the research shows is that before the message to move the arm, in a nanosecond, the brain asks a question. Do I want to move that arm? It happens at the speed of light, so we don't really realize that. Your brain is wired that you cannot be curious and defensive at the same time. If you use yourself and you teach others how to be curious when there's conflict, instead of reacting defensively, ask questions. That's interesting that you perceive that. Tell me more about that. What brought you to that place? Become a learner. Learn. Seek to understand before you're understood. You already know who you are. Try to understand who that other person is and why they're responding. What are they seeing that you're not seeing? And how do you teach all your leaders to do the same thing? That if there's conflict, that means that there's a bigger picture here and we don't have all the data and we don't have all the information. Play to strengths, not weaknesses. A toaster is a toaster. An iron is an iron. You ain't going to make them. Now, you could take the iron on a piece of bread and you could toast it. I mean, you could make a grilled cheese with an iron. That's possible. And so the possibilities of teaching additional tools and additional tricks and additional languages is part of strengthening yourself and your team as leaders. Think another way to look at it is if you have on your team an English speaker, a Spanish speaker, a Chinese speaker, a Japanese speaker, an Arabic speaker. Those are all different languages. And words do not mean the same in those languages. If you can learn, and it's possible if you're an English speaker to learn Chinese, or if you're Chinese to learn English, you'll never be able to completely translate, but you have now more tools in your toolbox. So learn and teach your other leaders, whoever you're leading, to learn from everyone around them. And maximize the strengths of the people that you have. That whole walk the talk, cliches are so trite, but you know, it really sucks. They're true. And the higher up you go, the more people look at what you do and not what you say. What are you doing? One of the reasons that I go to the front lines and go on visits is we say that that's the most important work. If I never touch the point of service, I am not living the mission and the vision and the values and not honoring the work. What I do is saying, I'm too important and your work is not that important. My behavior and my words are incongruent. It's hard to get people to follow you if your behavior is not congruent with your words. Acknowledging valid styles and preferences and how you can teach those toolkit extra things. One of the things that we do in our executive team is I give every one of the executives executive coaching. If I can shorten the forming, storming, norming, and performing cycle at the executive level, every time we add a new executive, I've actually increased productivity. What executive coaching is teaching each of those executives additional tools besides what they're wired with and the tools that they come with. They come to know what their tools are, but they also come to understand what their colleagues have. Tenacity. Dottie Deremo in the frequently wrong but never uncertain category. I have a rule. Tenacity trumps talent every time. So let's talk a little bit about tenacity. There's an old African proverb that says, if you wish to go quickly, go alone. If you wish to go far, go together. In this time of quarterly return on investment and short-term thinking, as a CEO, I can put lipstick on a pig and make any organization look good in 3 years. I can do chainsaw massacre, eliminate positions, do a variety of things that show the organization is profitable. And have a 3-year out clause and leave and make myself a boatload of money. Many CEOs do that, and in the meantime, they have decimated their organization for long-term sustainability. They have decimated it. The true leader is able to look at short-term and long-term sustainability. Alan Mulally for Ford Motor Company is one of the best leaders that I see, who is able to balance the and relationship of that quarterly return, no results. Good intentions don't help patients, families, communities. Good intentions don't help the company. It is only the outcomes that make a difference. But also the long-term sustainability. Another haiku, problems worthy of attack prove their worth by attacking back. Anything that's easy is not going to make that much impact. It's the tough stuff that really makes a difference. And how you as a leader hang tough through what I call the zone of despair. Let's see. Anybody play golf here? Tennis. Okay. Bowling. Yay, there's some bowlers out here. This is good. Okay. I'm a hit and giggle golfer, so I can tell you from my personal experience, I have gone to a golf coach. And my drive lacks a lot. We're talking about 50 feet, maybe. I'm a heck of a putter, but I can't drive that ball for anything. So I go to a coach, and I'm doing this, and the coach says, now twist you got to hold the club this way and that way, and widen your stance, and keep your head, follow through, and la 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 la. And then I hit the ball, and it sails. It's a beautiful sight. Every time I'm with the coach, I do that. And then I have to play in a scramble. And it's the first tee. Everybody's watching. I'm anxious. I get up there. My brain takes over. My muscle memory is not there. And guess how far I hit the ball? 50 feet. Performance goes through a natural process for you personally and also for an organization. If you make a change, you get worse before you get better. Because you and the organization don't have muscle memory. And in that zone of despair, there's all kinds of grieving. There is anger, denial, bargaining, and tremendous pressure to go back to where you originally were. So I'm on the tee, and what do? I go back because it's easier to go back than to keep practicing and to have poor performance. Over time, however, if you continue to practice, you will have what I call shift happens. And you will go to a higher level of performance. The CEO or any leader, when you make a change, you need to be prepared for the zone of despair and the grieving and the anger and all the things that will go on with the people that you lead, and the pressure to go back to the way the original process was. This is how it works in an entire organization. The first zone of despair that you have to go through as a CEO is your own. OMG, this is not working. I'm going to have to make a change. Nobody's going to be happy about it. I'm going to be taking a lot of heat over a long period of time and working through my own zone of despair to get to the place. And let me give you a specific example. Hospice of Michigan in 2009 was a good organization. We had good quality, but it wasn't consistently excellent everywhere. We had sometimes decent financial performance, sometimes not so good. It wasn't consistently excellent. As I made an assessment of the organization, we were living on our press clippings as the leader in the Harvard of Hospice and yada, yada, yada. As I really looked at the data, I really looked at our performance, it was B. But if you're Harvard of Hospice, you better be A+. And we were not A+. Even more concerning is we were not prepared for healthcare reform and the major challenges that were coming to the healthcare sector. And if we didn't change proactively, we would be like General Motors, and who had to react because they didn't make the tough changes. And I realized as the CEO, the buck stopped with me, and we were going to have to make dramatic changes to re-engineer our organization. What we did is create what we called the 5-diamond level of excellence. That we had to consistently, as an organization, achieve a 5-diamond. If you go to a 5-diamond restaurant or hotel, you know the difference. And that our patients, families, and communities deserved it. 64% of our competitors are for-profit. Many of them are publicly traded or have private investment capital. It is not. I have 150 competitors in Michigan. We're not singing Kumbaya, we are the world. It is a dog, and you wouldn't think in hospice that it would be like that, but it is a dog-eat-dog. There are 60 competitors just in Southeast Michigan, all competing in the same space. And if we didn't survive as an icon of nonprofit hospice care that had a social return on investment and was mission-focused, how would the sector survive with at least some modicum of what was right and appropriate in this kind of very important delivery system? We decided to become 5-diamond excellence: quality, service, teamwork, resource stewardship, mission outreach, sacred space. Those were the 5 diamonds we had to achieve. Those words were very important to choose because it was from the boardroom to the bedside. Aides don't give a hoot about profitability. Or nurses don't give a hoot about profitability. What they do care about is if you say, we need to be stewards of the resources that are given to us because otherwise we're cheating our patients, families, and communities, that makes sense to them. Growth, again, is something that does not resonate with them. But mission outreach, that it is our duty to serve everyone who needs and seeks our care, which is part of our mission. If we're not growing, we're not achieving our mission. We did those 5 diamonds. We made a decision that everyone in the entire organization was going to have to re-interview for positions. We used lean technology and lean process improvement to analyze visits, 23 different visits of all of our providers of service, and how much time it took, not only for the prep, but for the actual visit, what had to be done. And then we backed into what our customers asked from us. They wanted more aides and less nurses. So we restructured the team, and we backed into a zero-based budget with 20% fewer positions. We were very transparent in January of 2010 and said everyone is going to be re-interviewing for their jobs. We are going to be basing this interview on performance, attitude, not necessarily experience and longevity. And there will be fewer positions. We're going to give a severance package. You make a decision as to whether you want to be part of the new Hospice of Michigan, because there's going to be a higher level of accountability for everyone in the entire organization. We had a 3-day intensive with our leaders. All of our leaders were interviewed by the end of January of 2010, and there were 30% fewer leaders. We then went through and interviewed staff, and there were 20% fewer positions. Some people chose to leave. We thought we would eliminate 80 FTEs. We eliminated 120. It was not easy. But I can tell you at the end of 2010, our employee engagement went from 3.8 engaged employees to 1 non-engaged employee on a Gallup Q12 score to 10 engaged employees to 1 non-engaged employee. In one fell swoop, we got rid of all the cave dwellers, constantly against virtually everything. Those folks that are cancers in the organization. Today, I'm here to tell you that of very few nonprofit hospices are making money from operations without fundraising. We are. We're in very solid financial shape, and the entire culture is better. But we went through the zone of despair at each level. The VPs, Dottie, you're nuts. We can't do this. Oh my gosh, what is this going to mean? How is this going to impact our referrals? What's going to happen? Then the directors, then the managers, and then the staff. We did lose some good people that we didn't want to lose. But we lost a lot of folks that we wanted not to stay. And some of those good people that we lost came back. They found that the grass was not greener over the septic tank. You always think it's greener somewhere else. And now we have the gift. Now we have the gift of a higher level of performance and balancing mission and margin. Finally, in this process, if you're the CEO, you should be reinventing your organization about every 7 years. So, revolution, let the organization stabilize a little bit, let it kind of take a breath and evolve continuously. Another revolution in order to have long-term sustainability. Success is getting up one more time than you've been knocked down. So if you're knocked down 20 times, you get up 21 and you're successful. And in terms of success, as Josh Linkner says, failure is not failure. Every mistake is a portal to discovery, allowing you to keep moving forward. From failure you learn, from success not so much. As a matter of fact, the more successful you are, the more vulnerable you are because you start to believe your press clippings. I'm going to bring it on home with some holistic leadership, and then we're going to have a time for question and answers. I've talked about personal lessons. I've talked about leading others. Now let's take a macro look at what happens from a larger perspective of an organization. You can see I have a little bit of the Eastern philosophy as part of the underpinnings of how I approach leadership. There are four, in my vernacular, four main issues that have to be put together in a synergistic approach in order to use 100% of the organization. I call it the head, the hands, the heart, and the soul. Very easy words: head, hands, heart, and soul. Many leaders fall on one side of the spectrum or the other. The head and the hands are more of the left brain analytical stuff. Framer, strategist, tactician, planner, analyst. It's really the strategies, tactics, frameworks. Those are all the things that happen from a head perspective. Hands is the doing, driving to execution, creating results. That means implementing, making sure that implementation happens and that results are achieved. Accountability is absolutely essential that results are achieved, because otherwise you're cheating your customer, whoever that may be. However, that's only 50% of the organization potential. The other 50% is that heart and soul. The soul is having a higher purpose. You're the mission guardian, the vision champion, the values keeper, assuring that those things are permeated throughout the entire organization. And from a people perspective, the heart of the organization, staff engager, staff empowerer, facilitator, having staff have ownership in the enterprise. Problem with this group of folks, and that tends to be on the nonprofit side, and the head in the hands tends to be on the for-profit side, is both are leaving 50% of the organization and potential. To really have holistic, W-H-O-L, instead of whole, H-O-L-E is a dark, deep place. It's a cavern. So if you have a cavern in any one of those areas, you don't have a whole. But if you focus on all four of these things, you will be maximizing your organization's potential or your area of responsibility. Now into the secret sauce. First of all, do the fundamentals. Make sure that you are covering all four quadrants. Do you have a strong mission, vision, and values? Are they permeated throughout the entire organization? Are you engaging your staff so that you're using everyone's potential? Do you have strategies and tactics and plans and measurement? And do you have results? At the end of the day, are you producing results? What we have is really an alignment from the boardroom to the bedside of the strategies and the tactics, specific measurements that the board looks at, called a radar chart, all the way down to measurement at the team level. We have an incentive system so that our staff are engaged in the enterprise. The enterprise has to achieve its financial goal, but every team, their quality scores impact whether they're going to have a quarterly incentive or not. And there's transparency throughout the entire organization. Everybody knows what everybody else's team is doing. And there's a lot of self-policing, because if a particular team is missing its goal and missing its mark from a quality perspective, they look at somebody else and they say, well, what's going on here? We also have something called the Agreements of Belonging, which is our rules of engagement. Everyone signs the Agreements of Belonging every year on how we're going to treat each other. And we call each other on not following through with agreements of belonging. The C-suite, whoever is your team, the tendency in the C-suite is to allow for golf. I talked about golf, how bad I am. But in golf, it's all about your individual score. It's all about how you do. And a lot of C-suites are set up. It's all about my personal performance. There's a belief that competition, internal competition, is good. What happens is folks stab each other in the back and sub-optimize each other. And the ability for the team to win the game is decreased. What a C-suite has to do, all of the chief whatevers, CEO, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, chief medical officer, you name it, what they have to do is play basketball. If the C-suite can't pass the ball and they're not able to change up their offense and their defense depending on who they're playing, you're not going to maximize the ability to be functional. It is the job of the CEO to make sure that that happens. How I do it with my executives is 50% of their incentive compensation is related to their personal performance. The other 50% is related to how we do as an entire organization. So if they screw one of their colleagues, they're actually impacting themselves. And that sends a message of what is valued and what is expected. Finally, innovation. A CEO is a surfer dude. Did you know that? I'm a surfer dude. I know it's hard to see, but it's true. What you need to realize in terms of your organization and whatever enterprise your company is in, it's on a wave. That wave dies. It eventually dies. Your job as the CEO is to steer the board into the curve of the wave and get maximum thrust, but also to know that that wave is going to die. And you need to pick up a new wave. And the question is, which wave do you pick? That's the strategies. You don't want to get on too soon, and you don't want to get on too late. If you're not doing innovation and testing innovation, you will not survive long term. Hothousing innovation is absolutely essential because the organization responds to something new like a foreign antibody, like the flu, like you've introduced a virus. Innovation then needs to happen outside the traditional organization. You nurture it until you can bring it inside. And I'll be able to talk afterwards about our national company that took 10 years of incubation, but now we have close to 60 potential partners across 39 states for our upstream advanced illness management company. As the CEO, you're the heat shield to protect that innovation until it's there, and you're the heat shield for that zone of despair. What I have done now in this time, in this warm room after pizza, is gone from some myths of leadership, some practical tools of self-management, hopefully practical tools of managing and leading others, and then some secret sauce about how to look at a whole organization and support innovation. With that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I hope you can be brave enough and ask some questions. Yes, ma'am.
Would you talk a little bit more about your experience being confident about making change? Because you talk, when we have discussed and interact with others, we have to understand others, what they are arguing with us. And still, as a leader, you have to make a decision. How do you balance that?
The question is, how do you balance and have confidence when you are making a significant organizational change? The first is to go inside. And what I mean is, I had to have some tough talk with myself in looking at where the organization was and what it was really doing and not doing, and to stop feeding myself messages I wanted to hear, and to really look at the unvarnished truth. And it's easier to become confident when you can come to the place of really understanding with depth what the problem is. The second way of having confidence is to understand that once you make a major change, it is not easy. It is not for the faint of heart, and it requires a level of tough love. And what I mean about that is tough love is hard on the issue, soft on the people. Peter Senge, who is a guru on leadership, talks about a rubber band. The more you stretch a rubber band, the greater the tension in the rubber band. The tendency is, once you're in the zone of despair, is to lower the tension by lowering where you're going. What a real leader will do is move the organization up to the next level of performance. And the confidence comes from being sensitive to others, allowing them to express their issues, and yet being tenacious about where you have to go from a higher purpose. Example, in our organization, I had in the several phone home with Dotties. We are not well positioned, and it is our job to be here in 10 years. And also, it is my job as your leader to be proactive. I will not have this organization go the way of General Motors, and that means making some difficult decisions. So you're listening, and yet you are consistent about where you need to change. Yes, ma'am. Great question.
How could we make sure that, especially for women that want to make it up in their organization, that they could also achieve compliance?
The question is balance in your spiritual and your home and your work life for women is harder, and that the rule is you have to work twice as hard to be a woman, and that you forget about your balance in home life. My mother worked her whole life, and she was very wise. She said, you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. I was not a CEO when my children were younger. Now they're 47 to 42. I've got 4 kids. And I could not have done this job when they were younger. They needed more time and more attention. Secondly, I made a decision. I could have been a CEO a lot sooner, but then I would have had to move out of Michigan. And my husband's business was here, and our family was here, and our children were in school. And so I made a decision not to travel. Those are personal decisions that each person has to make. I also was coming up when I was the only woman in an all-male group. And at that time, women were trying to out-testosterone the men with these little ties and wearing suits that were very manly. And I chose not to do that because I believe that what I bring to the table is that balanced view. And at the end of the day, if you produce results, they might say it's touchy-feely or try to discount because you're a woman. But at the end of the day, if you produce results better than any of your peers, that is what carries the day. So be true to who you are. Know that you can't have it all. You just cannot have it all at once. And you have to, those are trade-offs that we all have to make. Men have to make that as well. They make those trade-offs. We as women tend to think that men don't, but they do make those trade-offs, especially now. Yes, ma'am. How my yes, how hospice care and end-of-life care has influenced my view of leadership. Well, if you rewind 15 years ago, I got my second master's when I was at Henry Ford Health System. I was working full-time and going to school full-time with older kids, and it was tough. I can't tell you that it was not tough. My goal was to become a CEO at Henry Ford Health System. I felt that my view of leadership, unless I was in the CEO role, I would not be able to test this idea out. And I'd seen too much of the heart and soul or the head and hands, and I saw the the potential that was being left on the table for good outcomes. And instead of complaining about it, I decided I needed to go back to school to become a CEO. I was going to be a CEO. I was on track for promotion. And a search firm came to me and said, we would like you to be the CEO of this little company called Hospice Michigan. Wasn't even in my radar, wasn't even anything I was thinking about. I said, thank you, but no thank you. 8 weeks later, they came back and they said, we would really like you to be the CEO of this company. In that 8-week time frame, my mother died in hospice. So sometimes you think you're going somewhere, and life has a way of having other plans for you, whatever you think your plans are. And how hospice has changed is reinforced my understanding of what holistic leadership is about, and how through this process with this company, I've had the privilege of leading wonderful people, but also producing some great results because we were all able to do it together. And that has reinforced my view of how important holistic leadership is. And when I talk about sacred space, in my opinion, work is sacred space. We spend more of our time at work many times than we do at home. And for us to really, for enlightened leaders to understand that and make work a enriching place to be so that you're doing well while doing good. It's possible to do well and be financially really strong and make money and also do good. And I think this work at Hospice of Michigan has only magnified my commitment to that, to holistic leadership. It's a great question. All of them great questions. Yes, ma'am. Final question. And I'll stay up here if anybody wants to talk with me. The question is how, when you're talking about staff development and development of leaders, how important is it to be able to support risk-taking? It's absolutely essential to support risk-taking, but within boundaries and frameworks. And we have on our intranet a way of bringing ideas. We're going to be having competitions of testing those ideas that will produce the best outcomes. There are ways of looking at failure. Our at-home support program was 10 years of evidence-based outcomes research, and it was a great service. Nobody wanted to pay for it. And there was a lot of pressure from the board because it was seen as a lost leader, as a failure. Now it is our future. And as the CEO, you need to allow for testing, but within in continuous quality improvement, in people coming forward with ideas so that there's a formal way of protecting those and allowing them to test. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You learn from it. You also don't browbeat people if they've tried something and it's not been successful.
Great. Well, it's a perfect time to stop.
Thank you.
In the center, we have a small artifact that is meant to symbolize positive spirals that great leaders create in organizations, and you're the perfect recipient of it. So thank
you. And if anyone wants to talk with me, I'll be up here if you have any other questions. Thank you for your patience and your time and attention during lunch hour.
And I also wanted, for anyone who is interested in just staying, learning more about the center, Chris White is always here until 1:30, sort of in a receptive state of mind for anybody who'd like to talk about ways to get